Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to cook up some kind of herby salmon in like a little chimichurri sauce and with a kind of garden veggie ratatouille pasta. And we're going to bake up our apple cinnamon sourdough loaf. So let's get this going. I have my Dutch oven preheated to 500 degrees for the last hour or so. I actually had my husband preheat it, so if anything goes wrong, we all know it was his fault, guys. I'm gonna dump it out. This is the one we kind of finished up prepping last night during our dinner stream. We did our shaping and our roll. Just gonna dust a little bit of the flour off, and we're gonna score it, and then we're gonna put it in our Dutch oven here. So I'm gonna do a nice big score down the side. And then we'll just do, again, the classic wheat leaf because I always just find it's just so pretty and basic. You know, you don't have to be all fancy. As long as it tastes good, it's a win. We'll do one more. So this one is chock full. We've got cinnamon in the base dough. Then we have cinnamon spiced apples mixed in there as well. And when we did our lamination process, we also added cinnamon sugar. So it has like a nice little cinnamon sugar swirl in there. So beautiful into our thing. We're going to put our lid on. This Dutch oven is hot, hot, hot. So always remember to wear your mitts. And we're going to pop this in the oven at 500 degrees for 20 minutes. And then we will turn the temperature down to 450, take off the lid, and cook it for another 20 minutes for kind of that perfect golden brown crust. So let me set my timer for 20.
You have a question? Do you have to make those cuts in the bread?
It allows your bread to expand, so pop. So for a better crumb, yes, you want to make the cuts on it because it allows it just to bake up a little bit better. So I mean, yes, technically you don't, but your bread will split on its own as well if you don't. So you want to make that cuts. Let's get our pasta boiling here. So we'll have it ready. So I'm just going to use some, I call it Fairfell, but apparently I think it's like Fairfall or something like that, or Fairfella. But I have always called it Fairfell. And maybe I am right saying it, but I doubt it. We're going to add it about 3/4 of a box. I find a pound of, well, this is not quite a pound, but I find if you use a whole pound, it's a lot of pasta. And we're going to give this a quick stir. And I'm going to add a little bit of salt to my water because we will use a little bit of this starchy water for kind of the sauce base for our pasta. So I just want to make sure it's got a good saltiness to it. Now let's make our chimichurri marinade for our salmon, which is really just kind of fresh herbs. I've got a lot of basil here, green onions, garlic, and lemon juice and olive oil. So a pretty simple sauce, and then we'll kind of little mash it. So I got my little fondant roller so I can use it as a mortar and pestle type thing with my bowl. Okay, let's get our green onions here. We're going to keep the whole part of the green onion. And so we're just going to mince it up. We're going to save this part of the green onion is going to go into kind of our ratatouille base, and the top parts are going to go into our marinade. And this is a sauce that we're going to put on it, but we'll also reserve some to add at the very end as well to add just a bit more flavor in it. So we're going to go over, got my green onions here, and then I've got a fresh oregano, which will be, we're going to use some, I'm going to save some of this for my ratatouille. So I'm going to put this to the side. We're going to have our fresh oregano in there, which typically in chimichurri sauce, it's either fresh parsley or cilantro. I'm doing it a little bit different here, but kind of the same basic fundamentals. So more like a herby chimichurri sauce. but it will have the garlic and the lemon juice and the olive oil. And it's kind of more, it's kind of like a pesto almost, but just not with basil. But we will be using basil. So I'm going to I want a lot of flavor in here. We're going to save a little bit more of this for our salmon or for our pasta. And again, just getting off all of the little twiggy branches. And then I'm going to really kind of finely mince this up as well as I can. The more cuts that you make on your herbs, the more flavors that they'll let out. So we want to make sure we've got them minced up really well so we can get all of those nice garden flavors into our dish here. And then we have lots of salmon. I got 8 fillets, but these are huge fillets. So there will be plenty of salmon left over. But luckily, my kids absolutely love salmon. So they'll be happy. There we go. So again, mincing it up as nice and fine in there, because you also don't want to have really big leafy parts because you just kind of want to have a nicer texture. Okay, so now we've got our basil, our oregano, and our green onions. And we're going to add them to our bowl here. I'm going to grab all of these little bits off. Let me grab a spoon. And we're going to add in garlic and fresh lemon juice and olive oil and garlic salt and black pepper. And it's going to be the base for it. We're going to add in about a teaspoon and a half of garlic or jarlic. Again, you could always use fresh garlic, but sometimes I just feel like it's a lot of work. And the garlic does play a part, but it's not the sole part of this sauce, so I'm kind of doing without. We're going to add juice from 1 whole lemon in here. Give it a good squeeze, and then I'm going to grab my juicer here. And this citrus note is going to make this sauce really light and fresh, but it will also help kind of cut through the fat in the salmon and really make it nice and juicy. There we go. This is pretty juicy lemon, which is nice. And then we're going to add in our olive oil here. We want about maybe like 1/4 of a cup in there. And then we're going to do our garlic salt. I want about a teaspoon, maybe teaspoon and a half, because it's going to flavor all of our salmon. And then about a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. And you can use freshly ground, which will give it a bit more of a kick to it. And then I'm just going to use, this is a fondant roller, so I use it as a rolling pin, but it also works really good as a like mortar and pestle. So like it helps me really like smush in some of my spices and herbs here, and it really helps kind of bring out the flavors. But you could also just use the back of a spoon if you wanted to. Or you could always throw this in a blender or a food processor to get it even more fragrant and flavy. I just want to mash some of those herbs up into that oil to really infuse it, as well as that kind of the garlic there. There we go. So this is our base for our marinade. I'm just going to give it a little taste. See? Good. Make sure we don't need to add anything else to it. I don't want it so strong that you can't use it as a sauce afterwards, but you want it strong enough to kind of marinate everything. And so now I'm just going to drizzle this over, put it on this, and then I will rub it on in just a second with my hands to really bring those spices in. But I'm just going to drizzle it over first. And this is just going to give it such a nice kind of fresh flavor that will be really popping. Okay, and then we're just going to take our hands, and you could always try with the spatula, but this is one that it really is going to work best if you just kind of pat it with your hands and then just give a good wash afterwards, because we want all of these flavors to really sink in. go. And the lemon juice in here will start to kind of cure the salmon a little bit as it will, but it will make it nice and juicy and flavorful. So if you leave your salmon in a marinade that has lemon juice for too long, it will start to turn white because it kind of cooks it chemically. Okay. Now, let me give my noodles a stir here. Perfect. Let's start prepping our vegetables for our ratatouille, and we can start sauteing them up. I'm going to start with my onion because my onion, like I always say, it's a solitary vegetable. It needs a minute in the pan by itself to really bring out its flavors, and to really have it shine. So we're gonna do a nice, not a small, like a dice on it. And we'll have it start cooking in there up with some olive oil. So I'm going to use my 6-quart saute pan for this because we'll be throwing our pasta in here, and that's going to just help. It'll be a big enough pan for it. I'm going to start heating up my oil on about a 6, so a medium high, and we'll throw these onions in, and then I'm going to chop up my peppers next to go in here. And you kind of are going to go from like your firm / driest vegetable down to you'll end with your softer wet vegetables for this. Okay. And here we go. Let me grab a tongs. I will say, if you don't have like 2 or 3 pairs of tongs in your kitchen, or you haven't started using tongs to cook with, try it out. I love cooking with tongs. I used to just be a spatula spoon girl for the longest time. And then I dove into using tongs, and I now use them for everything. And I own far too many pairs of them, but tongs are, and get the ones that are silicone coated. I love those the best. Okay, let's get our peppers chopped up so that these can kind of cook. Right before we throw our peppers in, we will put some garlic in here to let it saute up, but we're not going to do that until the onions start. I've just got 4 small sweet peppers here that we're just going to throw in here, but you could use a bell pepper, any color if you'd want. Again, I prefer the red, yellow, and oranges because they're not quite as bitter as the green, but really anything works. And we're going to cut this a little bit, bigger than our onion, because we do want nice kind of little pepper chunks in our little ratatouille. There we go. I'm more like a pasta puttanesca, where it's just kind of a collection of everything that I had in my refrigerator. I had an eggplant that really I needed to cook up, so I'm like making something with eggplant today. Okay. So once those are in, then we're going to do our mushrooms after that, and then we'll do our eggplant or our zucchini and then our eggplant. Eggplant is really, really, it's like, so it's a sponge. It soaks up all of the oil. So I always put it in last, or it will just soak everything up, and then you end up putting way more in it.
You have a question? Can you go over the marinade for the salmon?
Yes. So it's kind of like an herby chimichurri sauce. We used, basil, fresh oregano, and green onions in it, garlic and lemon juice, and then of course garlic, salt, and black pepper. And we just kind of finely diced them, mixed them up, and then I rubbed it over the top of it. And that's just you've got that acid from the lemon juice that will really cut through the fat in the salmon to make it nice and juicy. And then those fresh herbs will really, really shine. There we go. Get our mushrooms. I'm using baby bellas, but this could also, white buttons would work for this. I wouldn't waste a nice mushroom on this dish because it doesn't need it. There we go. So we're starting to get, our onions are getting translucent now. I always cook them until they start to get translucent, and then I add in my next kind of vegetables and whatnot. because once you throw other vegetables in, onions don't get enough heat to kind of get their flavor out. We're going to throw in a little bit of garlic here. I'm going to just about a teaspoon, and then I'm going to get a little bit of that garlic juice as well. Now, with garlic, we're going to add it in here, and I always say, got to stir it up, let it cook for about 30 seconds. If you leave it too long, your garlic will burn. Garlic burns really quickly, so it's something that you kind of got to keep an eye on. But once you start adding in some more vegetables and whatnot, it takes away some of that direct heat. There we go. Perfect. Let's add in our peppers here. We're going to let these saute for just a few minutes and kind of bring out our kind of flavors. And then I'm going to get my green onion bottoms that we saved, because I never like to waste anything with the herbs. Try to use it all. We're going to let this give it a good stir. And now I'm going to turn my pan down to a 4. And we're just add a smidge more of olive oil, like a teaspoon, right in the middle. This is a big pan, so you've got to use a little bit more. I am making a lot of food, but smaller pans, you can use less oil in it. Let's check our noodles here.
So you got a question? How'd the chicken Caesar wrap turn out?
Oh, excellent. When Teddy came out, he was first really sad that there was a salad in his wrap. But then I took the salad out and he ate it all. But then he demanded I put the salad back in, and then he proceeded to eat the rest of it. He ate half of a wrap. I was so surprised at how well he ate. Noodles need like a minute more, but they were delicious. Even my older son, got home from middle school, and we had a little bit left, and he even was like, these are really good. And I was kind of thinking, I'm like, oh, I could make these wraps in a lot of different ways using different meats or different salads. So I was like, it's a nice little change up on thing. But the chicken stayed really juicy on there, and it kind of held together well. Like the wrap didn't get soggy because the salad was inside, the kind of wrapped around where that chicken was, which was nice. Okay, we've got our peppers in there. Let's add our mushrooms. And then I'm going to go get a little measuring cup, and we're going to take some of this starchy water out because we're going to be using that in our sauce here. So let me grab. We don't need a big one, just a small one.
You have a question? Is tonight the cinnamon apple bread?
It is. It's actually baking in the oven right now. So in just a few minutes, we will be taking off the top of the pot, the Dutch oven that it's baking in, and then turning the temperature down so you'll get to see a little peek of it. I'm really excited for it because it's like, my husband loves my cinnamon roll sourdough where it's like got the cinnamon swirl in it. And this has got spiced apples in it, so I think it's going to be delicious. So last time I did apples with it, I did a caramel apple. You can get these little caramel balls, and that was really, really good. So I'm excited to try kind of this variation.
You have a question? What does saving the pasta water do to the sauce?
So the pasta water is starchy, which is going to act as a natural thickener. So it's going to allow you to thicken up your sauce without adding in flour. And I am not a fan of adding in flour or cornstarch to my pasta sauces. So any way that I can naturally thicken a sauce is like the best. And it just gives a nice like velvety texture to it. We're going to strain it. There we go. And then I'm going to leave my noodles over here to cool. You don't need to toss them with oil because we will be throwing them into our sauce. I'm going to get my pan over here because we'll start cooking off the salmon here in a little bit. Lost of mushroom. Just give this a nice stir. I'm going to spread it out, and then I'm going to start cutting up our zucchini and our eggplant. So I said my eggplant was desperately needing to cut up. I've been deciding kind of what to use it with. Now,
question: do you post your recipes?
We upload our video to our link on our page, so you're always able to re-watch our video anytime once it's up, anytime you want. And I always say that's like the best and quickest way to recreate my recipes. For our members who've joined us, we do send out recipe cards every week, some new ones, just a couple every week for them. So, but again, uploading them on there is, the best way to do it. So we got our eggplant here. We're going to add it in here. You can see it's already started to kind of oxidize, a little sweetness to it, but that doesn't change its flavor. Here we go. So I'm just cutting it up and I'm cubing it. These are going to shrink down a lot. So when I always talk about mushrooms being porous and like, zucchini and yellow squash, eggplant is like a sponge. It soaks up everything. So, and you don't want to use too much oil with eggplant because it literally soaks up all the oil. And then it gets really, really greasy. So we'll saute this off and, I'll throw some oil in there after I saute up my zucchini. But I want it to be the last thing I go in there because otherwise it will soak up all of the oil in my pan. But I do love zucchini. I think not zucchini, eggplant. It's really delicious. One of my favorite ways that I had eggplant was my grandfather, and I'll tell you when we come back, but let's go take the lid off. But now we're about to do, I was saying, our sourdough. So we're going to have my kitties. Ta-da. So this is our apple cinnamon loaf. We bake it at 20 minutes at 500, and then we're going to take it out. We'll take the lid off, we'll put it back in, and then we'll bake it at 450 for 20 minutes. So this is always did it pop or not? And it looks like I got a great pop on mine. It's already kind of doubled in size. You can see that cinnamon poking through and those little apple bits.
You have a question? What does eggplant taste like?
Eggplant really has no flavor, I think. It takes on whatever you want to flavor it. So it really is one of those things that just mimics the spices. It's more got a spongy texture. But it doesn't really have a distinct flavor. It's very mild. So the favorite way I was talking about, I've had it, was my grandfather, and my grandparents retired to Spain, and he had this outdoor oven there, and he would wrap up the eggplant in aluminum foil, and he would cook it in the coals of it, and then he would open it up, you'd take it out, and he'd scoop the inside out, and you made this delicious, it was like a smoky eggplant dip, and you added like oil and probably like tahini to it, and you just dipped your bread in it. It was so good. And it was like one of my favorite things that he made. It was always like an appetizer, because in Spain you have like kind of multi-course dinners there. And so it was always like the appetizer for the meal. And I still love it. And I've tried to recreate it, and I've never been able to get it as good as my muffa, which is the Swedish word for mother's father. So it's just kind of how you say like, grandpa in Swedish. But I always know I will say my grandfather I think he's one of the reasons why I love cooking, because he was such a phenomenal cook, and he was brilliant. I will say he was a genius. He was a nuclear physicist, but he just did so many amazing things. He always wanted to know the technical things in cooking, and he was a great gardener. In Spain, he had this lemon and lime tree that he had grafted together, so he could grow both lemons and limes at the same time, using like the ancient Mayan technique of grafting. So But I think he really spurred on because I had so many great meals that he would cook for us in Spain or when he would come at Christmas time. He was just such a great cook. Okay, we've got our zucchini in here. We are going to start kind of pan frying off our salmon here in a few minutes. We'll get our oil ready. I'm going to add, before we add in our eggplant, I'm going to add a bit more oil in here because, like I said, it's going to soak up some, but you want enough to kind of crisp it off. So I added in towards the very end. I'm adding in about a tablespoon or so to get a nice kind of coat on here. And then we're going to throw in our eggplant. Here we go. And then I'm going to quickly stir it to try to coat it all up because if I just leave it sitting there, that eggplant's going to soak it up, all of it up in there. Here we go. And then we're going to let this saute, and I'm going to put my fresh herbs in there in just a second to kind of get going, and then we'll start cooking up our salmon. Salmon doesn't take too long to cook. I'm going to have to cook it up in batches, but it only takes about, I will say, for each batch, it's probably about 6 minutes. So it's not a long process, and you want to cook your fish at the very end because if you cook it too much in the beginning, and it'll dry out and it will sit down, then it sits and it's not as good. So let's get our fresh herbs in here. Again, we're going to be using our oregano, our basil, and we've got our green onion bases that we already threw in there. So the fresh herbs really are what flavor it. I'm going to add a little bit of pesto to this as well. That's kind of going to make it so it has kind of this velvety pesto flavor to our sauce, but it's not going to be overpowering.
Question if you can go over the salmon marinade again.
Yes. So it's pretty basic. I used green onions, fresh basil, fresh oregano. We minced it up nice and fine, so that's the green that you see. Then we have about 2 teaspoons of garlic, of minced garlic, and then juice from half a lemon and some olive oil, about 1/4 cup of olive oil. Some garlic salt, like a teaspoon and a half, and then 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. We're going to kind of smash it all together, bring out those flavors, and then we just rub it over the top of the fish and we're letting it marinate. And then we have a little bit reserved, so when we're done cooking it, we will drizzle that over the top, and that's actually like that oil is marinating a bit more in it now, so we'll have just even more fresh flavor to it. Okay. Let's get this nice stir here. And I'm just trying to get everything to get a little char up first before we add any of our pasta liquid in and our other herbs because I want the veggies to get a nice little, sear on it. Let's add in our fresh herbs on here. And then we're going to start heating up our oil for our fish. I'm using a nonstick pan here, so I shouldn't need, I'm actually going to, I don't know if you're in your cooking, you prefer certain burners and doing things on certain time. I prefer to fry right here. So we're going to heat that up, our oil up, and I'm not going to do it so high. I'm going to have it over like a 7 in here, and I'm just putting in about, I would say, a teaspoon and a half. I do have a large pan, so a smaller pan would, of course, use less. We're going to let it heat up because you always want to add your fish into a nice hot pan. If it's too cold, what will happen is the natural juices will come out and you'll have a drier end product. And then when we fry these off, we are going to put them presentation side down. So the side that you want up when you plate, when you want it pretty, is going to be cooked down first. So that means these have skin on it, so that skin will be facing up because your first fry on the bottom is going to give you your prettiest fry.
What's your favorite brand of olive oil?
I am not a picky person when it comes to olive oil. I know some people can live or die by it. For me, I just use so much olive oil when I'm cooking because it's the only oil I pretty much use. I buy a lot of time what's on sale or at Costco. So I don't have a favorite one, except there used to be, and I think they still have in some things, it's called the olive oil store, which is really, but they had really good olive oil, which is if you're going to be dipping your bread in, that's when you do want a nice olive oil. I don't have a thing brand because everybody else in my family, like my kids and all, they like butter with their bread. But my mom and we kind of grew up with that trend of dipping it into the seasoned oil. So that one you need a nice, delicious one for. Okay, I can tell it's nice and hot because my burner's hot. So I'm gonna find my 4 fattest fillets and we're gonna put them up first because they're gonna be the ones that rest afterwards. And I want them to, if you cook your fat ones that way, they'll stay warm and better. There we go. Get this up here. And I think I can slide one more up top. I'm gonna have to do a small one. There we go. I will say it's just easier to use your hands to place them in there than to try to use a spatula because they'll slip and slide. So just always give yourself a good wash up afterwards. Okay, we've got our fresh herbs in here. You can see our eggplant is starting to pick up those juices, get nice and tender. As you can see, it's starting to get like kind of golden brown. When it cooks, it gets a bit more brown. We're going to add in some pesto and onion powder and garlic salt. So I told you we're kind of doing like a pesto with the fresh herbs, and pesto is essentially just minced up basil, pine nuts, Parmesan cheese and seasoning. I love it. It's delicious, but I'm pretty picky. I only like 2 brands. I like Kirkland's, which is Costco's brand, and I like Rana, which those are the only 2 pestos that I have found that I think taste good. I feel like a lot of them are either really pine nutty or they are chemically tasting. So these are my 2 favorites. I put 3 big spoonfuls, so that's probably about 3 tablespoons. And here it packs a lot of flavor, so you don't need to go crazy on it if you don't want to, but you can also add even more. So I love to just put pesto right on my pasta and eat it like that. But I make it a little bit more mild for my kids.
Do you ever make homemade pesto?
I do. When my basil is growing and is really abundant, I will make homemade pesto. I planted 10 basil plants this year. Sweet Jackie killed 2 of them. He picked them and sat on them in my garden, but they're not producing as much as I thought they would. Like normally I've got huge and they grow. This year they haven't been, my highest producers yet, but when I have bundles of it, I do make my own pesto. And a lot of times I'll cut it with spinach because it gives you a little bit more bulk for it. But yes, it's delicious. Okay, we've got our pesto in here. Pesto has salt in it, so I'm going to add a little garlic salt, but I don't need to add as much as if I were just leaving it plain. We're going to add in some onion powder. This is just going to make it when we do our sauce, just have a lot of flavor and savoriness. That was probably about a teaspoon that I shook over. And then we're going to add in our garlic salt, just a good shake over. We can always add in more. And then I'm checking my fish. I'll know when I'm ready to flip it is when I can see kind of this golden brown crust forming on the side. This might be the best angle. I don't quite have it yet. It's still a bit white on there, or like light pink. So once I've got that, I'll know to flip it. Let's give this a good stir, and then we're going to put in our pasta water. And the pasta water is going to do 2 things. It's going to help thicken up our sauce, but it's also going to work as a deglazer. So when you're cooking in a pan, a lot of times, if you can see here, I'm moving it around, some of our herbs and spices and bits get stuck to the bottom of the pan. Don't worry, not a big deal. When we add our liquid in, all of those will lift right off, and they will add this just rich flavor to our sauce. Okay. So I'm going to pour it right over that, and I'm just going to use my spatula. And then you see it's just going to start to pick right off. And that's just a lot of the herbs and flavors and just that good crusty stuff that has just so much flavor in it. So when you're making your sauces, always scrape the bottom of your pan to bring it up. Just like if you're making a gravy and you're deglazing, that's what you want to do. I don't dump it all in at one time, a little at a time. Let these flavors kind of marinate and come together. There we go. Now I'm going to grab a spatula out and tongs, and we're going to flip it because I think I see a nice kind of golden edges forming. I'm going to take my middle one first. Beautiful. I'll do this guy. Look at that. Perfect. We've got these nice kind of golden fillets. They're cooking right through. They're beautiful. The skin, if you're using the skin on like these do, they do need to cook a little bit longer because that skin acts like a little insulator and it kind of protects the heat. But the skin on keeps your fish juicier. So there is the benefit of having the skin on. If you cook your fish correctly, your fillet, you should be able to just lift it right off the skin, no problem. Okay.
You have a question? What type of pasta did you use?
I use Fairfell pasta, like bow tie, and we'll add it in here in just a second. Once we've kind of got this rich sauce forming, and then you could continue and add in chicken broth if you want it, or white wine if you wanted a lighter fare. Again, my kids really love creamy based sauces, so we're going to add in some cream to kind of thicken, or it will also help thicken up the sauce. I'm going to probably start with like a third of a cup, and then we'll see how much more we need. I don't want it to be such a thick, heavy sauce, but I want it nice enough to kind of coat everything and have the nice flavors. Let me grab my spoon here, and then I'm going to just taste it and see if I need to add any more pesto too. Still a vegetable in there. Very nice, mild basil flavor to it, which is where you get that from the pesto, which is delicious. I'm going to add actually a little bit more garlic salt. And a smidge more cream. Now that it's kind of roosted up, like maybe a tablespoon or so more. Here we go. And we're just going to let these kind of simmer down on low. And then we'll put our pasta in for a little bit to let it cook. But I can see my salmon is about cooked through. So I'm going to grab a little baking sheet out so we can put it on. Well, that side isn't. These two are, so I'm going to remove these ones. I have my big burner, but not all of them get the same amount of heat. So we've got our first ones can go up. And you can tell they're cooked through. Look, if you look on the side, they're nice and white. You don't want to cook them so long that you have white fat coming through the top. That means you've overcooked them. So I feel like a lot of times when you bake them in the oven, you'll get that white fat to come out. So you just want to make sure you be careful with that you don't overcook it where you get that. Okay. This one's just about done. Now, again, these are going to continue to cook, and they will sit there for a few minutes in standing while we cook our next kind of set. Again, these are very big ones. We're going to cover them up with, again, a little bit more of our marinade. See if I can get my last one in here. I said my fillets, I got ordered 8 of them, and I didn't realize how fat they were or how big. Okay. We'll let these cook. Let me get rid of this. And now we're going to take kind of the rest of our, we've got, remember how we saved some of our marinade? This is definitely delicious to have. You're going to pour a little bit over the top, and it's just going to add even more flavor. So you have your original ones that kind of were marinating it in, and this adds that really fresh pop on top.
Yeah, question. Can you go over when you flip the salmon again?
So when I'm cooking it, and I'm cooking mine over about a medium high, I'm at about a 6 right now after my pan is hot. When I see the edges of my salmon start to get like a golden brown color, kind of like you'll see right here, that's when I'm going to know to flip. Until you see that, it's going to be more pale and it's not going to be quite as ready. I will say, cooking, give your salmon room. I try to make sure I have spacing between each one. That's going to help it cook up a little bit better. Like one of mine isn't as on direct heat as the other because I'm trying to force it in there to make all 4 fit. But I will always say, give your pasta or your fish room, or any meat really, room when you're cooking it. We're going to add in our noodles here. Don't worry that they've stuck together. You didn't need to toss them with oil or anything like that. Once we mix them into the sauce, they are going to come back apart, and then they'll pick up the nice sauce for this. And this has got a nice, it's like an eggplant ratatouille or a puttanesca. But it's just kind of a delicious herby based sauce with that pesto in it, the fresh basil, the fresh oregano. And I will say, most people, fresh basil is pretty common spice a lot of people use. If you haven't started working with fresh oregano, oh, it is so good. It is such a game changer. It's so much better than dried oregano, and I love dried oregano. Okay, let's get this all coated up here. And then, so you see how, like, we put it in there, but my pasta isn't drenched in sauce. You want it to coat it, but you don't want it so heavy that it's like a soup. Because you want to have these noodles stay nice and, still have that firmness to them. If you have a really runny sauce or a lot of it, you'll get more of a soggy noodle. Here we go. Let's check out. I'm going to rotate and give these ones up here a little bit more heat. And I have a feeling our thing is going to go off in just a second here. So let's sprinkle our Parmesan, which I love to add it. I'm not going to mix it in. I'm going to sprinkle it on top. And then the heat from the pasta steaming up is going to melt it. And that way you'll have this kind of nice little cheesy topping to it, which goes well with the kind of the pesto. You don't need a whole lot. Just a nice little kind of sprinkle over it. Okay, let me just clear this out of the way because we're going to be bringing a hot pan over here. Okay, let me grab my oven mitts. Ours is beeping. So I like, when I bake mine, I do kind of a golden blonde roast to it so that when you heat it up the next day and you toast it, you're not going to have a rock hard crust on it. So look at this beautiful sourdough. You can see that cinnamon sugar. That's where that kind of darker brown color is, the sugar kind of caramelizing in it. But it is going to be delicious. So I'm going to put it right here. When you bake in a Dutch oven, this Dutch oven is going to remain hot for about 20 minutes. So I always take mine out right away so that my bottom doesn't get overcooked. Let's slide this off because, look, you're going to have this nice kind of golden brown crust. If you leave it in there, that crust is going to get rock hard. But again, this is our cinnamon apple sourdough loaf that we made. We've got one whole Granny Smith apple diced up in here that we then coated with a cinnamon sugar on those apples so they have a nice spice to it. Then when we laminated it, We sprinkled cinnamon sugar throughout the whole lamination process. So when we rolled it up, it's going to have this nice cinnamon swirl in it. But we've got our good peak on it and it will be delicious. But we're not going to cut into it yet. Maybe at the very end of the stream, we'll cut into it. When you make sourdough bread, you have to let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes after you bake it. Otherwise, what happens is it gets gummy. And that gumminess is because the steam didn't escape from it. And therefore, and then it just kind of ruins the texture of it. Look at this. There we go. Beautiful. So you got this again, golden brown crust on there, which is perfect. That gives you that crusty edge, which will be delicious. And these are going to be ready in just a second. Okay. We're going to turn it down just a smidge. And you know what? We are just about done here. So I think I'm going to plate up our dinner because you guys don't need to wait for the final cooking of that. Okay. And I'll grab a knife because at the very end, after we do our goodbye or whatnot, I'll cut it open for it. We'll see how it pops in there. Okay. Looks like. Slide it this way. Okay. Let's get our spatula. Gotta get my shovel, guys. If you don't have a kitchen shovel, you're missing out on life here, guys. Okay. Today we made a delicious eggplant kind of puttanesca pasta ratatouille with chock full of eggplant, zucchini, mushrooms, sweet peppers, onions. We added in fresh basil, oregano, and green onions, and we made a nice creamy pesto sauce with it. And then we have our herb, kind of garden herb salmon in like a chimichurri sauce, as you can see here. We made this sauce. It's kind of not a true chimichurri, but it's a kind of a fresh herb one with that fresh basil, oregano, and green onions that we then minced up. We added in lemon juice, garlic, pepper, and garlic salt. That is just refreshing and delicious and kind of cuts through it. And then, of course, we have our cinnamon apple sourdough bread. So I'm going to send you guys off, but at the very end, right before we leave, I'll cut it open because it'll have been about 5 minutes there. But guys, thank you again for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day to kind of show you what we're making and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, all you have to do is go to that page, search for what we cooked for. So we've got our, salmon and our eggplant puttanesca pasta. And, you guys can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all the different cooking gadgets that we use in our kitchen. I've got my pans in there, my hex cloud, I've got my saute pan, all of that in there for you to check out. Now, guys, is for the beautiful reveal of our thing. So I'm going to just cut it right down the middle. You can see we've got that nice kind of crust. Look at that beautiful crumb. Do you see there are apples in there? We just got this lovely how soft it is. And it just pops right back up, guys. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.